Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by Techstrong and WhiteSource. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting presentation ahead of us, but first I have just a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion or you'd like to rewatch or share, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our webinar today. If you have any questions, I'd like you to direct those to the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. And for any other comments or you'd like to let us know from where you're tuning in, we want you to use the chat tab. Finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. Our topic today is open source threat hunting, finding unreported vulnerabilities. And I'm joined today by Daniel Elcabez, Vulnerability Research Team Leader at WhiteSource, and Adi Rashkes, Development Team Leader at WhiteSource. It's my pleasure at this point in time to turn the floor over to the both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
Thank you, Cody. We're excited to be here and appreciate that you've taken the time to join us today. Our agenda for this session. We'll start with a background story, followed by a simplification of what we call the vulnerability lifecycle. In addition, we'll cover the origins of unreported vulnerabilities. Lastly, how we support the community and what methods all of us can do to pitch in and help each other. Imagine this scenario. A developer working on some large product. He receives a bug report from a customer which states that due to an unlikely input, the application crashed. He starts working on the case, finding the root cause and fix it. He proceeds to code review and finally release a new version. Bugs that cause a crash happens all the time. We've all experienced this at least once in our life. And the developer fixes it quickly. What can go wrong, right? Let's take another scenario. A customer reported that due to an input provided, he receives a long, weird error. The error includes some information about the lines of code that might cause the issue. Like the previous case, the developer fixed the issue and quickly releases a new version. Sounds legit, right? Well, some of you already figured out that he might have missed a step here. The developer hasn't taken in mind any security considerations while fixing these bugs. If user input can make our application crash or yielding errors with the internal information, we need to fully understand what can be the impact of these bugs, as they might be security issues. I'm sure the developers here found a missing step very quickly, and that I'm not revealing anything new at this point. Well, that's exactly what we're seeing in the community. Many developers know this already, and they are thinking about the security aspect when they receive this kind of reports. Many developers review the code with security in mind. Then, when finding security hole, they are categorizing these bugs as a security issues, most of the time fixing them to the point of being completely secured. They even adding comments and tagging it neatly. Now everything is fine, right? In fact, there is another missing step. To complete the process from end to end, the developer needs to share this information with the users of the product. The community that uses products need to know that there is a security issue in some versions. They need to understand that this is not just another feature or bug fix, but an actual concern to their organization. They need to have this information to decide and to prioritize the version update. It's 2022, and all of us already know how severe can be the impact of application security issues. Now that we understand the importance of this step, how do we share this information with our customers, users, and the community? You might email them, or add it to your release notes, or create a dedicated advisory. All of these aren't bad ways to share this information with your users. But what about new users? Or there might be users that don't read all emails from all the products they have. How can we solve this matter? We need a place that can act as a focal point for all this information to complete the process from end to end, from when the developer receives the bug report until all our users know we released a version which fixes a security issue. And we already have such a place that the community can rely on, which security researchers and developers commonly consult with. It is the Common Vulnerability Exposures Program, also known as CVE program, run by MITRE, a nonprofit organization. WhiteSource researchers seeing many products, small and big, that still doesn't share all their vulnerability via the community agreed solution. Only a subset of all publicly disclosed vulnerabilities have been given a CVE identifier, leaving out the rest of the vulnerabilities out there, which include undiscovered, undisclosed, or unreported vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, each year many organizations are exposed to hundreds of vulnerabilities that go unreported. Let's define and clarify what are undiscovered, undisclosed, or unreported vulnerabilities. Undiscovered vulnerabilities are the first stage within the vulnerability lifecycle, from the first implementation of a vulnerable code until it's been discovered, either by a developer, security researcher, or anyone else. Undisclosed vulnerabilities is the next step in the vulnerability lifecycle. It's the stage when someone found a vulnerability and contacted the maintainer of the code. And now it needs to fix it as soon as possible. From security perspective, this stage is referred as disclosure policy period. But sometimes this stage can be the final stage of the vulnerability lifecycle. This can happen due to a decision of the product owner to classify the vulnerability as undisclosed. This happens mostly in proprietary software. In this case, the product owner doesn't want to share that he had a vulnerability due to different reasons. Why product owner might do this? He might do this because he's afraid that it might attract negative focus to the product following the vulnerability disclosure, or that attackers might try to exploit the vulnerability, or it can hurt the product brand reputation. Well, it's true. It might attract more focus to their product. But is it negative focus? Almost every day we see new vulnerabilities in products of tech giants such as Google, Microsoft, Apple. Is that bad? I don't think so. I think it's the other way around. I think those companies benefit from that. They benefit from constantly improving their product security. And by doing that, their brand is perceived as more trustworthy and more secured. As a security researcher, if I see a product that have only few vulnerabilities, or worse than that, if it has none, that instantly raises a flag that this product surely has undiscovered vulnerabilities. We're left with unreported vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities exist because of the last missing step in the vulnerability lifecycle. Vulnerabilities that have been discovered, they've been disclosed, meaning that the maintainer already know about them, he fixed them, and he might even added comments and remarks. But he didn't share this information with the community. Sharing it in the widely known and agreed convention of classifying the vulnerability with a CVE ID, or at least sharing it in a formal advisory. This gap in our community of unreported vulnerabilities is unfortunate, but we think this is the right time to raise awareness about it and talk about what actions you and us can do to narrow or even eliminate this gap.
Now that we understand the topic, let's talk about the next question. Why are we still experiencing unreported vulnerabilities in these days of 2022, where the security awareness has increased and the industry of open source is highly trained for sharing security information and zero-day vulnerabilities? There are plenty of reasons, and we will cover the top. Let's talk about the maintainers of the open source libraries. Maintainers are developers, among others. The developers are the ones responsible for writing a code with a security vulnerability and also for fixing it. Developers are not usually trained or properly trained for security awareness, and there are very implications regarding. The reasons we still see unreported vulnerabilities are. So the first one is awareness. Developers aren't aware that they fix vulnerability issues. Developers usually work by tasks. They have their own tasks, and their goal is to make the feature work or the bug to be fixed. While they work, they do not think about security vulnerabilities. And in smaller companies where the security culture is still not well defined, there are no other people involved in detecting new vulnerabilities before releasing a new tag. The second one is importance. The maintainers and the developers don't understand the impact or the importance of sharing the security issue. Security culture within an organization is crucial. Usually, lack of this culture may cause real damage to the company and to the users. This is exactly the case. If the organization is not aware of the importance of sharing, they definitely won't publish it and waste their time and effort to share it. The next one is reputation. The maintainers or the developers afraid of what people think on the quality of their product or their code. So we have two sides here, the developers' points of view versus the maintainers' points of view. Let's start with the developers. If a developer detected a security vulnerability within the code, he may notify about it to the management or to the relevant stakeholders in the company. And then the decision is not in his hands. But if the developer finds a security vulnerability and didn't notify about it because he thinks that it will affect the way his manager will think about the quality of his code, he may fix the security vulnerability without notify, or on the worst case, he can not notify about it at all and also not fixing it. If no one is aware, it cannot cause damage. The second side of this section is the maintainer side. So let's talk about the case where the maintainers are aware about security vulnerability within their code. The same thinking can occur. They can think that if they will update the community or the consumers of their product, it will impact the consumed rate or the reputation about the quality of their product. If multiple vulnerabilities were detected, it can impact their reputation. The decision of publishing can be a management decision, and it can take time. And as we all know, time is critical in this industry. In addition, as Danielle mentioned before, open source projects with no security vulnerabilities at all are definitely suspicious as vulnerable. Share your findings. You will be valued more for sharing security findings than the reputation of a product with minimum vulnerability detected. The next one is how to report. The maintainers are still trying to figure out how to report security issue. Reporting security issues can be done by multiple ways. Some are more formal, like publishing a CVE, and some are not that formal. And we are going to cover this in detail later on this session. The maintainers have to set their own security culture and decide how they want to publish their security findings. Learning all the options, getting conclusions, and eventually making a decision can take time. And this step can stuck the whole publishing process. Next, handling security reports. The current section is talking about a case where the maintainers are aware of security issue and they do intend to report it, but they don't know how to handle it in terms of supplying the analysis phase accurately. They may understand the impact and the urgency and the importance of publishing it, but still don't have the knowledge or the people that knows how to create a full analysis of the issue with all the relevant parts like severity, risk, weakness, and more. The next one is reward. This section is really disappointing one. The case where the maintainers are aware of security issue, but they decide to keep it internal and not share it with the community due to selfish reasons. They don't get any reward and money or any other recognition. So why it is disappointing? It's disappointing because there is awareness of the security issue and there is understanding of the importance of sharing. They may have the ability or the knowledge of reporting the issue, but there is no collaborative thinking that we are a community of open source users and we should care for each other because otherwise we will all suffer from it. Sometimes you don't have to get something in return, and here the humanity of the maintainers is measured. There should not always be a reward or money for publishing information with the community, but there should be a personal responsibility and top-down thinking about the consequences. This is one of the reasons we decided to do this session and explain the importance of sharing. We all understand that we are all for one and one for all, whether we are the maintainers or the consumers, or whether we are a company like WhiteSource that supply this kind of services. The next, attackers might try to exploit the vulnerability. This section is also pointing to the case where the maintainers are aware about security vulnerabilities within their code. They may even know the severity and the weakness type and the risk, but they do not intend to publish it because they think that all the information regarding the vulnerability and how to exploit it will be published. And it's like giving the attacker a gift. Publishing the security information can cause multiple security attacks. One of the most important parts of publishing a security vulnerability is releasing a fix before the publication. As we saw in Log4j vulnerabilities a few months ago, the security disclosure policy and fix release were a mess, and attackers took advantage of the opportunity and tried to utilize the vulnerability in numerous places in the wild. Cases like this may happen, and we realize that there are people who consider not publishing vulnerabilities due to this concern. But we need to remember that we are all consumers of open source products. And what if an attacker will find those vulnerabilities before us while we won't even know that? This can be worse than actively sharing the vulnerability with the fix. We will give our users an option to upgrade and protect themselves.
As you realize, there are many issues that foster the unreported vulnerability situation, And each of these issues needs to be considered by the community. We need to think how to put an end to those issues, or at least improving the process. In the start of this year, we've experienced something new, something big. A known open source maintainer who maintains dozens of open source products, which are depended by hundreds of companies and millions of users, sabotaged his own repositories in an act of protest against what he declares as unpaid work. He intentionally caused denial of service within two huge NPM packages, Colors and Faker.js. I understand his frustration. He invested many hours to support the whole community without getting the recognition he deserves or the funds to support his work. On top of that, he received many requests of bugs or features and security reports telling him that his products are not secured enough. But as much as I emphasize with him, I don't think that this was the right approach. Open source communities build on sharing, giving, helping each other. If we do the opposite by acting selfishly, or worse, by harming each other, we are missing the point. We are losing our core purpose. Our communities still need to figure out what are the best practices to support and fund our maintainers. Until then, there are ways to support them. Each one of us can help by recognition and appreciation. Show your appreciation in any way that you can. It can be by paying it forward, support a project, or suggest a PR for bug or feature or security issue. And from the other side, when you open an issue, create a detailed request. And even before that, check if it already raised before and that you are not opening a duplicate. Lastly, the most simple and the most important act is to say thank you. Genuinely thank them. You might ask how WhiteSource support the community. Well, I can share that WhiteSource is doing a lot to support the open source community. We obviously supply a product for companies to manage their open source code with many features and an immense cover of open source vulnerabilities, but that's not all we do. WhiteSource develop and share with the community free developer tools to support the community with issues just like those we mentioned. Let's review a couple examples of free products that we share with the community. First is Defend. Defend is a solution for open source supply chain attacks. Additionally, we have Log4j remediation tool, which is self-explanatory. And there are more free tools that WhiteSource develop and share like Bolt, Renovate, and Cure. You can visit WhiteSource free developer tools page to learn more about them. Furthermore, WhiteSource invests a lot in our own research team. The team is helping the community via thought leadership guidance in various channels such as blogs, community research, supporting the disclosure process, verifying and creating POCs for vulnerabilities, creating and publishing the CV identifiers. To summarize, we are helping in the whole process from end to end. We help dozens of maintainers to enhance the product security and especially to close their gaps in the last step of unreported vulnerabilities. We supported this process with hundreds of vulnerabilities, and we helped the community by finding almost 200 zero days. To make this happen and to do it as efficiently and accurately as possible, WhiteSource became a CNA. CNA is short for CVE Numbering Authority. This is done to collaborate with MITRE. As of today, there are more than 200 CNAs helping MITRE. It makes me glad to see so many companies joining the effort. More than 60 new companies joined the program in the last year. Additionally, WhiteSource collaborated with NVD CVMAP project to make the process even easier for all the community. Each week, we are helping multiple cases of unreported vulnerabilities and finding new zero days. And we are currently considered as the most accurate grading company within NVD's CVMAP program.
Let's talk about what can you and all of us do about it. So we can sit back and do nothing. But believe it or not, each of us can be an ambassador of knowledge transfer and awareness of the importance of reporting on security vulnerabilities. We will cover the best practices of reporting and give you the knowledge of how to train the community of open source maintainers to put in front the security culture within their organization or even your organization. So, WhiteSource disclosure policy. If you are a maintainer and you discover a security vulnerability within your code, and you still don't have the time to learn the best practices of reporting or have the time or money to deal with it, you have the simple option to report it to us, WhiteSource, through the following link. We will take care of publishing it to the community and execute the proof of concept of the security issue. And in edge cases, we're even helping with fixing the vulnerability. We would like to emphasize that we are not the only authority that does this kind of services. There are plenty of CNAs that would be happy to assist and publish your security issue. Furthermore, we have no intention of publishing solely our service. Our goal in this session is to give you all the tools to assimilate an organizational culture of security and publishing findings on vulnerability with the community. You probably ask yourself why we do it and what do we get out of this. So our main goal as SCA company is to supply the best product and full and accurate coverage of security awareness. We want the open source software to be secure. We want the community to continue with publishing and sharing, even if we are a competitor, because it doesn't matter when we are facing security issue. Think about it like pandemic. It is a global issue, and there is no difference between different countries and culture. Let's move over each step of WhiteSource disclosure policy. So first, we receive a security report. The next step is basically providing a full analysis of the vulnerability. Actually, a proof that this report indeed pointing to a security vulnerability and analyze all the relevant metrics like severity, risk, weakness, the open source fixed version, and more. The third step is to contact the maintainers regarding the vulnerability analysis and, in fact, inform him of a security breach discovered in his software. In this step, we're actually giving the maintainers the option to do the publishing by himself. We will talk in detail in the next slide about this step. The fourth step is the resolution development. This step is actually the time to fix step. This is the time the maintainer is working on developing the fix, writing tests accordingly, performing code review until they're ready for the next step, releasing a new and fixed version of the product. And last, posting the security vulnerability. So you probably ask why we supply this kind of service as free service to the community. So as we mentioned all over this session, we are a community of open source developers and consumers, and we have to understand the concept of community, sharing, collaborating, consulting, and actually working together. We give the maintainer the time he needs to fix the vulnerability. We are not willing to publish security issue within open source maintainers project under our name. We are giving them the option to publish the vulnerability by themselves, in addition to the option that we will publish it as a CVE eventually and will take care of all the process. Let's dive deep into the process of the contact maintainer until the vulnerability publication. From the first contact maintainer note, we take 15 days until the second notification. It is important to emphasize that WhiteSource will not publish the security findings in between this period. After another 15 days, we have few possible scenarios. The first one, if the maintainer answers, then WhiteSource will give him 90 days to release a fix and then publish the vulnerability. As I mentioned before, we're even helping the maintainer with fixing the issue within their code in case they ask for. It is not that common and happened to us only several times, but we do offer it and you can use it. The second scenario, if the maintainer didn't answer or not willing to release a fix, then WhiteSource will publish the vulnerability anyway. Why we do it? So we have the basic responsibility for our security findings, and we understand that if we don't publish it, then it is a matter of time when an attacker will find it and exploit it. Again, we have no intention to harm a reputation of any maintainer. We have only intention of consuming open source in a secure manner, and therefore, we share the finding anyway. So now that we all align with the disclosure policy steps and service, let's review some examples of maintainers' responses that we received through the years and understand what are the reasons they didn't share their security findings. So the first example, I didn't know that I actually fixed the security issue here, which is a great example of awareness to the security aspect. The second, what this security issue means, how it affects me, and how do I fix the issue? Or, I tried, but I can't figure out how to fix the issue. And the best scenario, of course, is, thank you for doing this analysis. Can you help us with more projects? These examples connected to the issue of handling security reports. Lastly, are some amusing cases like, this is not a security issue, we consider it as a bug. Or, you will need a time machine to be exposed for this vulnerability as it is a very old version. Or, I will sue you for doing this. All these can be related to both reputation and importance. Next, let me introduce you to the next tool that you can use in order to assimilate security scanners in your software. OSS Fuzz, Continuous Fuzzing for Open Source Software. OSS Fuzz is a popular solution developed by Google to continuous fuzzing and detecting security issues within your software. It is an open source tool that you can integrate to your code. Fuzz testing is a well-known technique for uncovering programming errors in softwares. Many of these detectable errors, like buffer overflow, can have serious security implications. Google has found thousands of security vulnerabilities, and they share that service with the open source community. It started with 3 primary goals in mind. The first one, finding security vulnerabilities, stability issue, and functional bugs at scale. The second one is making the platform easy to use for open source developers and encouraging them to take security testing into their own hands. And the last one is getting the bugs fixed quickly. OSS Fuzz has a 90% fixed rate. So you can read more about it and try to use it. The next slide is help the maintainers or ask other maintainers for help. If you are a CNA or if you have already integrated security culture within your organization, you can offer your help to other maintainers. What do you get out of this? The same reasons we counted before. Establish your status as a CNA that helps the community and mutual guarantee in the open source security community. In addition to offering your help, it is important to ask for help. Pay attention that any delay in publishing can be harmful to the consumers. It is super important to collaborate with each other. We are a community and we should act like that. Be here for each other and pay it forward. The last and the most precious one is appreciation. Find your way to appreciate the effort of the maintainers that worked on fixing the vulnerability and invested their time and effort to share their findings with the community. Show your appreciation in any way that you can.
Let's confront the unreported vulnerabilities issue together. WhiteSource is here for the community. We are here for you. Our knowledge group and research team are available in the vulnerability research team email, and you can contact me or Adi directly via our email. All of them are shown on the slide. Please feel free to contact us. We are here for any questions. Moving to our Q&A section.
Hi, so we did get a couple of questions. So let's start from the top. Can you share a few examples of companies that you've worked with on unreported vulnerabilities?
Well, the list of companies and maintainers that we worked with from the aspect of vulnerability disclosure and research process is quite long, but a few examples are medical applications, lots of big NPM libraries, ArangoDB, Microsoft and Google open source projects, and even with open source project of NASA.
So our next question reads, how many unreported vulnerabilities exist in your opinion?
It is hard to give a number of how many unreported vulnerabilities exist currently, but the rough estimation is that each year there are around 800 new vulnerabilities that fall under this category.
All right, and so this one says, you mentioned you found hundreds of unreported vulnerabilities. How did you find them?
Oh, I will answer that. So it's a great question. Well, we are tracking code changes of top-ranked open source repositories. Then we running them through a machine learning model that we trained and developed internally for the past couple of years. The model classified the possibility that these changes fix the security issue, and then the security researcher review the code and perform the full security analysis phase. And from them, we process to the disclosure policy, from the contact to maintainer until finally creating a CVAD.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to take this opportunity to ask our audience to send in any questions that they might have. And quickly, while we give them a couple more minutes, I will be giving away a couple of gift cards. So this is for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Zhao H. Our second winner is Bharati S. Our third winner is Maria G. And our fourth and final winner is Daria K. So to the four of you, keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. If you don't receive an email, just check your spam folder. I'd also like to take this opportunity to remind our audience that the session was being recorded. So if you joined us late, or maybe some of you had to leave early, this recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live webinar. So another question has come in. How are your cyber defense strategies changing due to Russian cyber attacks? Or I guess any cyber attack these days?
Well, I can answer this. I'll try to. So our defense strategies aren't changing actually because of Russian cyber attacks. Currently, we are seeing those happening a bit in the wild. In the supply chain attack, we can see some aspects of from all the sides. But we don't need actually currently to change our defense strategies. Cody, I think we can't hear you. Sorry.
Thank you. So that was all the questions that we've received. I'm going to turn the floor over to you both once more in case there was anything you want to leave our audience with before we close up.
That's all, I think. Thank you, everyone, very much for joining this session. We really appreciate that, and we are enjoyed.
Well, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniel and Addie, for taking the time to join us and share your expertise. I'd like to thank WhiteSource for sponsoring today's webinar. And my final thanks, of course, goes to you, our audience. Thank you so much for being here with us today for the entirety of today's presentation. Please take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, and we hope to see you at a future Techstrong Learning webinar. This is Cody J. Brown signing off.